Rain, the source of Earth's fresh water and essential to life. Since our earliest ancestors walked the land, rain has shaped humanity and played its part in the rise and fall of civilizations.
There's a famous saying, "We kalani ola kahonua," and in Hawaiian, and it means when the heavens cry, the land lives, and that's what rain is.
And that's why it continues to play a pivotal role in the rituals of societies around the world. Rain refills our lakes and reservoirs, providing the water each of us needs every day. It feeds us by nourishing our soil, enabling our crops to grow and our livestock to flourish.
雨对人类的这个生存和发展是有非常重要的这个意义的。
But as rainfall patterns become more unpredictable, how will our relationship to rain be transformed in the years to come? And how do we make the most of this precious resource? The water that rain provides may well be our single most valuable commodity. After all, none of us could survive much more than 3 days without it. So as climate change disrupts rain around the world, how are communities adapting to the shortfall? And too much rain is a catastrophe just as deadly as too little. As the consequences of our changing climate become clearer, how we make the best use of rain is now one of the most pressing questions of our time. And if we fail to find the answers soon, the price we have to pay may just be too high. The west coast of Ireland gets plenty of rain each year. However, it's the continuous struggle with a lack of water that defines the lives of those living on Inisheer in Galway Bay.
Tá gantanas isce an nillan seo inis le éimlíonn déag. Tá sé 9 bliana 10 bliana ó bhí muid an séasar agus gosa hain gan saora. Is éochhachaí nillan go bunúsach. Éon bháisteach a hitchans ní aoninte háart, mar méar mo déad agus a chur san nómod imínte bhaintar seachtain.
Wel fwy láidir muidir gúil sus le tríchédan na gan bliana ach sa saoire ó aber máirte go sa gná blian tá sin cuairteirí teacht agus bíonn deis na gardú leis go dtí aber léidir lein nourished an tead go meach sus le míle go le sráintear takeisteach a bhar lean láis beidir gemacht a ríisteach ar nó testing na sciile chulas ortús as leiris agus chuilead so caafar freastal ar a méid an daoine.
Mochtar a tuisce brandse tá faoi bháir na huiire tamuideag de hínéig san naí agus ar éis agus 7 maidin so sin 8 nuair a chuaig gan haí gan éanaisce.
To alleviate the problems, 200,000 litres of water a day are shipped in during the driest summer months.
Tá gan isce mád as dros a bhíl faoi rós a bhó leanna sí rá go dtí go báisteach taobh seo go bhéit mo chéin isce bhailú a chuir don numar tóca sé táim bhain ismat tromachchatá gealta níl aon tuair isce bháisteach sa tú breanhar bhéile.
The resourceful people of Inisheer have their own methods of collecting water and use their supply wisely for projects like their community garden.
Ní intas gur an seanach goláin nach cáach a tuisce sálaach go dúra tú steach an tuisce gláán. Bhí tú íon tú cinse gur a isce gláán sal na chatú mácha tuisce agus bhain tú cúpla úsáid as isce. Níoch daoine gus casa in isce na bhataí, tar éis na fataí a bhro.
Since the island relies on rainwater for its freshwater supply, this is collected in purpose-built tanks.
Siad le cránal, siad an céad áitina le séir tar éis báistí go féidir an báisteach a bhailú, isce bhailú le chuir a gobal le séasar agus cosa héidir éis tar éis troma. Stiúchar ag críteach del ach an náitse ní heasa teosing íomhre nó tar éis réimtí báistí féad a heasa go dtí seán. Tá sé seo tromínis ó bhhar na beltainna seo caite. Ní héite bháisteach sách trúm le éonis go chuirte le chuir gobar le tú te réit go dtí namar.
Is dáhaí nach dugan tú faoi deara cecha mór agus tá tú spáráil tuisce go dtí go mín cuairteir a heach agus ghfuil tead an échan na láb agus a fágal a tuisce roicht agus tá tú breanú agus tá sé nós gur nóta leichead a tá ar a ligan síos le fána go tú rá náid na sin. Sinach í bhfuil muid cleachta tain, ach ní drochruda. Agus dálam tú fáid, agus dálam tú cusmharú días. Is cansail ar fad ghlacha leis go rud an luachfar an tuisce. Agus go cheacham níos mó measa bheith in na scanádú a cheapan.
Fresh water can also be in short supply in the slums of Delhi. In recent years, delayed monsoon rains and poor water management has led to some critical shortages across the city. Here, an incredible 30% of drinking water is wasted. Unable to spend millions on laying new pipes, the Delhi government uses fleets of trucks to supply those parts of the city that have no running water. To the south of the city, the Jai Hind camp is home to around 1,200 families. Today, Bibi Fatima is taking her 2 plastic containers on her daily journey to meet the water truck. The area only had enough water for everybody very recently.
और सबसे पहले पानी का ये समस्या है, पहले 2014 से पहले 4 टैंकर आया करते थे बस्ती में। पहले लोग एक टैंकर में लोगों का बहुत ज़्यादा लड़ाइयाँ हो जाते थे, बहुत ज़्यादा जो है टैंकर के ऊपर से गिर जाते थे, हाथ पैर टूट जाते थे। तो हम लोग बैठ के 16 घर मिलके उसका बाद में हमने एमएलए के पास गया, हर एक संडे को मीटिंग किया, फिर उसका बाद 8 टैंकर कर दिया।
With no specific daily quota, the residents developed a way to share the water fairly amongst themselves. But for many families, carrying the water back home presents an added challenge.
और सबसे बड़ी बात ये है जो जिसका घर में कोई जेंट्स ना हो, वो पानी लाए तो कैसे लाए? अब इतने बड़े बर्तन तो उठा नहीं सकते हैं, तो लोग किसी का रिक्शा है तो रिक्शा में 2 बंदा पकड़ के उठा लेता है, और ना तो लोग बम्बू से जो है कंधे में करके उठा के लाते हैं। और सबसे बड़ी दिक्कत है जो लोग जब बुजुर्ग है वो कैसे उठा के लाएगा? अगर किसी को उठाने के लिए बोलता है तो 100-150 रुपये भी मांगता है, कोई फ्री में तो ढोके ला के नहीं देगा।
Because water in the slum is in such short supply, the residents have no option but to make efficient use of their daily allocation.
जी इसमें देखिए बर्तन, कपड़े, नहाना, खाना जो भी कोई है सारी चीज़ इसी पानी का इस्तेमाल करते हैं, और इस पानी का बचाव भी लोग बहुत करते हैं। इस बस्ती में ये खूबी है जो लोग बचाव बहुत करते हैं। जो कपड़ा धोते हैं उस पानी से लोग घर भी पोछा लगाते हैं, उससे पौधों में भी पानी डालते हैं, बच्चे का पोटी वगैरह भी धोते हैं। तो इतना ज़्यादा पानी की दिक्कतें हैं, आप मान के चलो।
But securing a dependable freshwater supply is not confined to the poorest communities. Rising in the Rocky Mountains, the Colorado River is one of the principal rivers of the United States. Fed by snowmelt from the Rockies, it winds its way through 7 states in the arid Western Plains and is a vital source of water for 40 million people. In 1922, water rights were divided between the states of the upper and lower river basin, paving the way for the construction of 15 dams. The most famous is the Hoover Dam.
A modern colossus, shouldering the rock-ribbed walls of Black Canyon, stemming and controlling the floods, and bending the will of a hitherto ungovernable stream, the Colorado River, to perform the fruitful tasks of a civilization rapidly invading the limits of its last frontier.
The dam created Lake Mead, a vast reservoir which by today provides water to 20 million people. But the supply to this and other reservoirs along the river is under threat.
Climate change is causing the entire Colorado River Basin to warm. And ultimately, what that results in is a lower runoff efficiency. So when we're looking at the amount of runoff that we receive or the amount of precipitation compared to the amount of water getting in the reservoir, that relationship is changing. Starting in 2000, the Colorado River reservoirs were generally full, but the turn of the century marked a drying period for the Colorado River. So we've gone from reservoirs that were almost full to reservoirs that are in the 30 to 40% full range right now. We need to be prepared to use less.
As Lake Mead supplies water to the whole of the Las Vegas Valley, water restrictions were put in place soon after the drought began.
Okay, go ahead and look up 9512 Grand Canal.
Perry Kay has been a water waste investigator in the Las Vegas Valley for the past 18 years.
Water waste investigator 7158, time is now 7:07 a.m., 3rd of November. I have an irrigation system leak causing runoff.
I think that's an interesting thing.
This one piece will make 52 layers.
Watch on mobile devices or the big screen. All for free. No subscription required.
Causing runoff. The types of water waste violations that are against the law are watering on the wrong day, or a broken sprinkler, or a malfunction, as we call them, where water is coming off the property. We have various ways of finding water waste. We patrol neighborhoods. Also, we have reports from the citizens that will report that there is a water waste violation going on. We'll investigate those as well. I have a day of the week violation, water group D on a Wednesday, winter schedule. Also have spray and flow, misaligned sprinklers causing runoff.
A big component that really matters is that outdoor water use. And so when we look at having a watering schedule, we don't get rain. So our grass really is all surviving based upon potable water that comes out of Lake Mead. And we joke that there's a special place in hell for people who water their lawn in winter the same amount of days they water when it's 108 degrees out here in the summer. So our watering schedule adjusts. You can water 6 days a week in the summer, 3 days a week in the spring and fall, and 1 day a week in the winter. We have less than 50% compliance despite having that mandatory watering schedule. And we found that, you know, it's important to have a carrot and a stick. And that's sort of the stick side of our approach, is having water waste investigators.
To help save water, a turf removal programme has been in place since 2000. Residents are paid for substituting their grass with desert-friendly planting. But this once voluntary option is about to change.
We worked with our legislature this last year to mandate the removal of what we call non-functional turf. So turf that is only serving an aesthetic purpose in our community has to be removed by 2026 and can no longer be irrigated with Colorado River water. We have been really aggressive in trying to stay ahead of our water use trends and really keep them in check and make sure we're using water as responsibly as we can.
Whilst vast swathes of green are still permitted, like golf courses, parks and playing fields, the phasing out of non-functional grass is a significant step in water conservation. But one company offers a purely cosmetic solution to those who still love their lawns.
Lawn paint is a product you apply to a lawn as if you're dyeing the lawn just like you'd be dyeing hair. And when lawn turns brown, paint it, and it stays green until the grass grows out. It's a little bit kooky. It's a product that's been known commercially. It's been used in Disneyland and theme parks and golf courses for decades. So it's not a new thing, it's just not something that consumers have been aware of. It always does settle the color after a few minutes, so it'll be a little brighter at first. We always have to be looking out for wind, because if this gets on you, it's going to stay there. I have many pairs of shoes that I used to really enjoy wearing that are now spotted green. After this is fully dried, you can roll around on the grass just like anything else. It will not harm the groundwater. It does not harm the grass at all. It's completely safe, non-toxic. This is simply colorant. It doesn't make the grass grow. It doesn't kill weeds. It just makes everything green. Our business heats up in different parts of the country at different times of year based on the normal seasons. Parts of California are very dry in the summer, so we'll sell it there when it's dry there. Places like Florida can have dry spells in the winter, depending upon where we're talking about. There's also the case that when you have an event, a wedding business, or a home that's being staged for sale, anything that's brown or patchy is going to look terrible, and real estate agents across the country understand that they have to make that home look saleable, so grass paint, lawn paint is one of the ways that they do that.
With an average of 190 wet days each year, painting their lawns is something the inhabitants of the west of Scotland are never likely to have to do. So one of the challenges for local architects, like Martin Bailey, is to create buildings that can withstand Scotland's soggy climate.
As an upbeat yellow akin you hash as much as tall as different elements in a nishke the mesk Chinese jack can take us a be at gach larach every sakin. Smashin a Chinese jack gima tra as an upbeat yellow I guess a notion enough could go with the is that's a had holiday. Ha fiarst now ma chi with talk to be in a tenement and a glass rug as shown how quick into the head ha tar a head in the ballach and market idir snasa ga hada I guess this had written a ha gus karen greenies or hada in a horst dive ach ha the gen written practical kitcha then a huiske a tuich is strug she is in the ballach and ha gehilical fall of an taglach gachturist ha tar in a fiarst no they had a gunne grach gus iske a hilical fall of a bharach gyda grínias agus caran spaidirach a thorst gan a taglich in hain.
In nearby Helensburgh stands the Hill House, a magnificent building designed by the world-famous Scottish architect Charles Rennie Mackintosh. But flaws in the design means the building is prone to damp, so the National Trust covered it in a chainmail mesh to protect it from the rain and allow the house to dry out. An admirer of Mackintosh's work, Martin's come to analyse the damage rain has wreaked on the building.
He was a show ground in the written high. I think it's written about Mackintosh a fearchen and of nach the opdik nach the Hudvik Rova. Nachel cells each in the Hunyagan. Gero Mackintosh a fearchen is a render or horst hadish it can mulchin the Nunyagan, I guess, na tulchin gach count and tie. Is rud gyma urnasach a fewn y gynawn a fiach yn y render y gymig siachad ys hadesydd gach pist yn thai yn y dau fa gyma mod yn och yn orsyn. Var ys mwynioch y gynawn gyn gag sy'n dianaf y clachgig Portland Cement rwyd y fag y tyr ŵr agos nach roedd bwloch y tyg sy'n y gynawn. Agos y dyligyd ys y fewn ha Portland Cement gyma dianach agos leg ep ac yn ysgu ysdiach gan yn toglach a chalega sy'n ymach as idyd. So mar sy'n hag le gysgu yn brain yn balach yn agos rei yw'n i hysio tydych y grotag agos ha echlach y twytio mas a cheida tyfys dau yn cadach a ha chimiclid. A gyma dyrif cysd yn y rydyn sawr eisiau fe Macintosh i fiach ni yn y flysyn dau eich yw'r ciarst ffeinish yn stael edrych eich agos na fe fiach ni yn a ha gyma aneitir fe gyntol agos cydrymach yn yn alopo. I'n agos y gleig. Eisiau cysd gyma tainti agos dyrif a hawn ys chynio ffregar stawn haast.
Finding answers to challenging questions is at the heart of the World Resources Institute's mission, as they advise governments and multinationals on the most efficient use of our natural resources. At their Beijing office, Tiani Luo and his team know that one industry more than any other is responsible for the world's dwindling freshwater reserves.
Agriculture is by far the biggest water user on the planet, accounting for about 95% of the total amount of water that humans consume every year.
About 70% of the groundwater withdrawn globally is used for agriculture, and many of the most rapidly depleting groundwater sources, or aquifers, are beneath some of the world's largest irrigated lands.
To put it simply, an aquifer is where groundwater is stored. When water is needed in places where there isn't any surface water or there isn't enough surface water, we dig into the earth and we get water from the groundwater aquifers. But aquifers are like bank accounts. If you take out more than you put in, sooner or later, it'll be depleted. India is by far the largest groundwater user in the world. And our data shows that the average groundwater level under India's northern plains has been declining by over 8 centimeters every year for the past 20 years or so. The official data from the Indian government shows that for the entire country, over 17% of its groundwater blocks are already overexploited.
Rajasthan in the northwest of India is the most water-deficient state in the country. The semi-arid landscape is pockmarked by boreholes and wells dug by generations of farmers desperate to access the precious groundwater reserves. Water levels here are critically low, as wells grow ever deeper and many rivers have run dry. But since 1984, thanks to the efforts of Rajendra Singh, also known as the Waterman of India, many communities have now managed to regenerate their once arid landscape by reviving the ancient water harvesting method of the Johad, or percolation pond, that stores rainwater and recharges groundwater levels. Today, Singh is revisiting a recently constructed Johad to see the impact it has had on the community and the surrounding land.
कि ये तालाब गांव के पसीने से बना, गांव के पसीने से बने हुए इस तालाब को हम आज इनको इसका मालिक बना रहे हैं.
Singh's work is recognised worldwide. In 2015, he was awarded the Stockholm Water Prize for his efforts in improving water security for the people of India. As well as regenerating the landscape, Johads also seem to have a direct impact upon the local climate.
तालाब नद एनीकट चेक डैम बनाए तो मिट्टी का कटाव रोका, मिट्टी में मॉइस्चर बढ़ा, तो मिट्टी में जब मॉइस्चर बढ़ा तो उस मिट्टी में हरियाली आने लगी। वो जो हरियाली थी उसने हमारी धरती का जो नंगी थी, वीरान थी, जो एक तरह से रेन शैडो रीजन बन गई थी, वो हरियाली आने लगी और हरियाली आने से उस हरियाली ने ट्रांस एवोपरेशन शुरू किया। उसके कारण माइक्रो क्लाउड फॉर्मेशन होने लगे और उन माइक्रो क्लाउड्स ने जो हमारे मैक्रो क्लाउड आते थे अरेबियन सी से और बे ऑफ बंगाल से, उनको अपनी तरफ अट्रैक्ट करना शुरू किया। तो जो हमारी रेन शैडो रीजन थी, अब वो पूरे का पूरा रेनफेड एरिया हो गया। अब वहाँ बहुत अच्छी खेती होती है। हमने पिछले 38 सालों में 11,800 बांध जोहड़ बनाए और इनके कारण 17 लाख लोगों को रोजगार मिला। 1200 गांव जो उजड़ गए थे, बेपानी हो गए थे, वो लोग अपने आप वापस आके पानी आते के साथ।
And Singh believes that these kinds of results can only be achieved on a local level.
सामुदायिक विकेंद्रित जल प्रबंधन करने की जरूरत है। भारत में 15,000 से भी ज्यादा छोटी-छोटी नदियां हैं। उन नदियों में गांव के लोग अपनी नदियों को, अपने ओढ़ों को, अपने नालों को पुनर्जीवित करने का काम करने लगे। यही मेरा विजन है।
On this isolated island off the west coast of Ireland, monks sought solitude from the 6th century onwards. They also had to learn to make efficient use of their limited water supply. They came here because they believed that such an extreme location would give them a closer relationship with God.
Viadar a lorog fásach agus áit na mar seo áit íorgúlta cruig an rud be dhearra do ásach a déad fiáil in éire.
And like a desert, the island has a shortage of fresh water.
Léon tubair an Ileán. Ní léon tubair fíor isce, ní léon abhainn, níl fíor isce an Ileán ach a hitan an uas ón spéir. So, dá méocht trimacht seachtainna ann, dá méocht trimacht cúpla seachtainna ann, fiú an trimacht lé ann, de chahadís bheith séhrú chun isce chur fáil, mar ní bharid is seachtain gan an tuisce sons.
Being in such an exposed location, the monks would have had to contend with harsh weather conditions and plenty of rain, so they devised an ingenious method of harvesting the rainwater.
When it rained, the water would have come down and filled the well. So what we're looking at here is these upright orthostats, as we call them, and they've utilised the natural rock at the back, the sloping rock, and then you have this flagged bottom to it like we have out here, and really kind of using the natural geology to manage the water collection. So they worked with nature to ensure that they could survive out here. So they were in tune with nature. The way they utilised the sloping rock and then the channels that they put into it along the fault lines of the rock itself showed quite a sophisticated understanding of the geology. The cisterns here are really, I suppose, unique into themselves though. They really set out to make sure that they had a source of fresh water when they needed it. You would have had a vibrant community here that would have had, the need to use quite a bit of water. During that period, there was a deterioration in the climate, so it became a lot more storms, it became colder, so living conditions here may well have become just untenable and they had to move back to the mainland.
Between Scotland's mainland mountain masses and the island of Skye lies the Applecross Peninsula, one of Britain's remotest settlements. In the past, Applecross could only be reached by boat, and until recent decades, only by a treacherous high pass. To survive, this small community has had to use its resources creatively, including making the most of its abundant rain.
Gofatterastri David is a hawk, va fionis a choirsnach sminige gefeim shinje, grochen a sturig ein heen as an aimri chach, gevi feemak in a eric at the Hunolers and project and a chuder doi a vi na vuanach an a choirsnach. Agus va skema haido karan folashach mar Asian player root mersin hoshke Karsten David is a coik giak by project chuder doi or san yaranan a reich. Va feemak in a Karsten million nocht a hokal. Tuesday coik shachkanan, agus ranch na groch here and then the slugna keher shachkanan. So Gamalua, va denia gamataichkel feikin geroe na frosekt gama urst a chaskire big jumalach mar a chanasad. Da loch was ar cíne seo, loch an Éileann agus loch na Lárach, agus an tuisce is trúige amach na loch an beice sin, si is tronelt seach an na fála seo, agus nuair sin ha dó fóin mar is trícha strúige amach tron na scrín a cha cúteach a dó steach an na fís mhór concrete sin, agus an nátartí inlet an brein na concrete, agus an tuisce dó steach an na fí, agus ha fí berúi fan talamh she is can tie uya manuration.
The electricity created by the dam is sold to the national grid, enabling the community to take positive action in safeguarding its own future.
Agus ha skema chokutermach or mochula vashaw mar farshin the skema as na buanach gan the higas ha company na koirsnach an tachach shaw hianach agus hashin and do can be taihan a dollarstach taihanik prish recenta vies na chutchike denia oka gasonja halig in the skira agus a hummel skira mahaters and furacham la nunya so shinu was a kutermach agus ha jalin a ha chin mar farshin the skema hydro bishin na dollarstach in the taihan ikakaun how so hashin feikin mar ha carkel gluoset jalin the dollarstach in the taihan agus denia hummel agus could be attached to chin beyond reached.
In Kenya, a different form of regeneration is taking place, using a simple yet groundbreaking rain harvesting method. Lanoi Metakini works for the Maasai Wilderness Conservation Trust, who have teamed up with the Just Dig It charity to make the most of the rainfall in the area. Working with local people across Kenya and Tanzania, Just Dig It have regreened over 60,000 hectares of land and have brought over 6 million trees back to life. Their aim is to expand these projects across Africa.
When I was growing up, there were a lot of trees and vegetation cover as compared to now. I also get stories from my parents and my grandparents on how the rainfall was there before. There were a lot of rains as compared to now, and there were flowing rivers in Kuku, which have now all dried up. The landscape has changed due to various factors, such as overgrazing and increase of population and human activities, such as conversion of wetlands to farmlands. The level of rainfall has dropped. For example, last year we had 400 mils of rainfall. There were no long droughts as we're experiencing today, which is leading to the livestock moving to other communities in search of pasture. As a result, we are getting conflicts with the other communities because of the few resources. As a community, we noticed these negative effects, and we decided to have the band project as an initiative to help harvesting water so that we can have sustainable vegetation even during the dry seasons.
Bunds are semicircular holes 2.5 metres long and 5 metres wide. They are dug by hand in areas that have a slight incline to prevent water runoff. Persistent droughts have caused the top layer of soil to harden, preventing rain from seeping into the ground. Digging the bunds loosens the soil and begins the process of regeneration. Part of Lanoi's work involves travelling to Maasai communities in the Kuku Group Ranch to demonstrate how to dig and seed the bunds.
After the intervention, there was a big difference. New indigenous trees coming back and new bushes. By bringing back the vegetation, we are able to cool down the place. And also by having more vegetation, the carbon is absorbed, and as a result, we get more rainfall. Africa and the rest of the world can learn what we are doing here, because if we managed to do it here, they can also do it, as it is important not only to their livelihoods, but also to the ecosystem. Rain harvesting is very important, as it will enable us to be sustainable even during the dry seasons.
Just Dig It's projects have allowed thousands of people to remain in their homes instead of being displaced by droughts. Droughts which are partly linked to changes thousands of miles away in some of the most awe-inspiring ecosystems on our planet. Rainforests. Often described as the lungs of the world, these vast swathes of forest convert carbon dioxide into the oxygen we all breathe. But they also play a key role in the water cycle and are a vital tool in regulating the global climate.
Tropical rainforests have so many interesting features, but one of the most surprising to many people is that they actually generate their own rainfall. Rainforests are a critical part of the water cycle because they're able to draw water from deep in the soil. There are places in the Amazon where roots from trees go down more than 40 feet, and they draw water that's been stored from rainy seasons years past. That water flows from those deep roots up through the leaves and into the atmosphere, where it starts the cycle of convective storms, thunderstorms, and other rainfall patterns. That biotic pump is such a critical part of our understanding of the tropics and its role in the rainy season, as well as its impacts then on the rest of the globe.
But this fragile cycle is under threat, as 10 million hectares of primary forest is cut down every year.
Tropical rainforests are part of their own self-sustaining rainfall cycle. If 50% of the rain that falls on the Amazon region has been passed through at least one tree, then removing trees risks interrupting that biotic pump, reducing the amount of rainfall, and changing where those areas of rainfall, the winners and losers of rainfall, not just in the tropical rainforest regions, but across the globe.
Whilst deforestation in itself has a significant and direct impact upon rain formation, the way in which the forest is cleared is also having catastrophic consequences.
Fires are a critical part of the deforestation process. So we look across the tropics, looking down from space with our satellites, we see fires springing up every year across the agricultural frontiers, pushing further into tropical rainforest regions. Those fires send smoke high into the atmosphere. And it turns out that that smoke actually prevents clouds from forming. So one of the most sinister feedbacks is that those fires prevent rain from forming. So fires during the dry season across the Amazon frontier actually delay the onset of the rainy season. We've seen that the rainforest dry season has gotten longer, putting rainforest regions even beyond the deforestation frontier at risk of drought and dieback associated with that reduction in rainfall.
The Honghe Hani rice terraces in China receive a massive 1,400 millimeters of rain every year. But this area is also prone to dry periods. For 1,000 years, the Hani people have harnessed their rainwater by creating and managing an intricate network of interconnected terraces fed by ditches. But delayed rainy seasons are causing many of the ditches to dry up. The process of regenerating the terrace begins with clearing and seeding. Once that is done, attention can be turned to diverting the water into it. As ditch leader, Yang Chengzhang is responsible for the maintenance of the ditches in his village. His daily work involves inspecting the water flow of the ditches and fixing them where necessary. Today, he and the other villagers are replacing some of the wood used to control the flow of the water to the ditches. Regular upkeep by all the communities who live here means that a constant flow of water allows the terraces to flourish, maintaining a 1,000-year-old tradition. The narrative surrounding climate change tends to focus on the lack of rain. But extreme flooding due to excessive rainfall is a problem that many communities around the world are having to face more and more often. According to the World Bank, 1.47 billion people globally are directly exposed to the risk of extreme flooding, and over a third of them are poor. Mitigating this threat is one of the major challenges facing governments around the world. To deal with the problem of floods in the rapidly expanding cities of China, Professor Yu Konyang has come up with the idea of creating green spaces that can absorb all the excess water.
这海绵就是要让水有空间，首先你要让自然 要水要有它的出处，给水以空间，因为水它必须要有空间，所以这就是海绵城市的理念，这是我一直在倡导的。工业文明留下来的灰色的基础设施，成绿色的生态的基础设施。一个小村庄，两边溪流2条溪流，就从小就跟在河里游泳在河里抓鱼，是吧？小时候这个洪水来了鱼就上来了，所以对洪水有一种非常有期盼的这种心情，知道怎么样管理水，知道水怎么样能够灌溉庄稼所以这就是从小就学会了跟自然的这种和谐的关系。
And Professor Yu's love of nature played a key role in his radical solution to the problems caused by the rapid expansion of the Chinese urban landscape during the 1980s and 90s.
所以我最早提出了这个关于海绵的概念，把自然的城市中的湿地、城市中的河流、城市中的湖泊、城市中的低洼地，都要变成海绵，变成平时就是公园绿地，下雨的时候这些地方都可以容纳水。历史上就是这样，中国古代黄河流域的城市都是这样的。
Simple ideas informed Professor Yu's planning. Since water fills the lowest ground first, that is where the green spaces need to go. This means building the parks next to the rivers and building important infrastructure on higher ground. That is easy enough to do in new cityscapes, but what can you do with areas which have already been built upon?
北京的永兴河都是水泥、钢筋、采网取直的，是吧？一条水区，那我们就用了海绵城市的理念，把这个硬化的河堤去掉，水泥去掉，然后变成了生态的、绿色的海绵河道，就是让雨就地能够渗下来，就地渗到地下去。
The sponge city concept allows the city to absorb floodwater, to store it in ponds and tanks for future use in case of drought, and to create green spaces where people can relax and enjoy urban life in a beautiful setting. China has trialled the idea in 30 cities, but Professor Yu's vision is even broader.
与其花几百亿、上千亿做防洪堤，我不如让这些田给淹掉，淹掉了才能保住城市，淹掉了才能保住农村。但庄稼地是可以淹掉，因为淹完以后，它不用化肥，可以不使用化肥，少用化肥。从海绵城市到海绵田园，再到海绵国土，就是让国土来吸收、净化雨水，补充地下水，然后滋润这个整个土地，是吧？万物得以昌盛。
Rain has a huge impact on our lives. The fact that we need it to survive means it has always shaped our traditions and customs. But as the climate changes, so will where and when rain falls. Communities will need to adapt when extremes become more commonplace. Some of the solutions will be global, some will be local. But all of us will have to learn when to conserve and when to control rain. So the more we know about rain, the better we can respond to the challenges ahead. Rain, the source of Earth's fresh water and essential to life. Since our earliest ancestors walked the land, rain has shaped humanity and played its part in the rise and fall of civilizations.
There's a famous saying, "We kalani ola kahonua," and in Hawaiian, and it means when the heavens cry, the land lives, and that's what rain is.
And that's why it continues to play a pivotal role in the rituals of societies around the world. Rain refills our lakes and reservoirs, providing the water each of us needs every day. It feeds us by nourishing our soil, enabling our crops to grow and our livestock to flourish.
雨对人类的这个生存和发展是有非常重要的这个意义的。
But as rainfall patterns become more unpredictable, how will our relationship to rain be transformed in the years to come? And how do we make the most of this precious resource? Today, as we face unprecedented changes in our climate, our ability to forecast where and when rain will fall is becoming increasingly important. To aid us in our quest, we turn to satellites and supercomputers, to laptops, and even to pen and paper. And if all this fails and the rain does not fall where we need it, we turn to science.
It's been around us all this time. I mean, how big is the thing falling on your head in a thunderstorm is a question we still don't have great answers to.
So rain is not an exact science. But one thing that is becoming clear is that in order to survive the challenges ahead, we need to learn more about rain. When the Earth was first formed 4.6 billion years ago, it was hotter than the Sun is today. But following a cooling off period of 600 million years, the vapor that encircled the planet cooled and turned into rain. Then the Earth suffered a period of torrential rainfall that lasted almost 3 million years. This created the seas, lakes, and rivers of today, which covered 2/3 of the planet in water. But how do we know this? And in what way does this knowledge help us understand the world we live in today? We can find some of the answers by looking underground. Scientist Cormac O'Hamel is fascinated by the traces left on ancient rocks and fossils by prehistoric raindrops.
Well, he'll miss your real grachni in the Malakaha Uvanum. Agus he'll mention Agus Shilam Gafol. Grabala Commersaja Uv. Either Mehen Snishaw Ogs Nakian Ishana. Kastar Screefa in St. Uv. A Janga a Granta or Nabali.
This landscape in County Fermanagh exists thanks to the abundant rainfall it enjoys. Yet beneath the bog lies a more alien landscape, the Marble Arch Caves, also shaped by dramatic downpours.
This Jaslyn Gamore event shot agus a garg, Rhoda Cruhy go fada sin sheer. Os go dé Cruhy na Hovana, Jora Bega Ishke, a hitchhus Chilke, agus a Hannigan Bala Shawlig. Canad shop It's a dreig tool. Better níos far na be alles na hoven at an urchin na vekel. Sin eel chishni hiesen sin. August the shitsen. Tan kun sin hals of horn har for meder go lay her ad. A tas ogum. Go shillen. Iske an noos sin. Iske hitch mar achen hosen sin or an drumkla. A hanike noos fridge. An eelchloch a ligatas a hion. Agus a hanike noos. Agus a dag calcite in a ye. Agus a good shirishias go bon an eel chishni sin. Agus fagan se calcite. A grata hart for centimeter one. Gach mile blien. So ta sin meder go lei ad. So sin céad go lei mile blien ó hosaí an cruthúsin. Agus tá rudí eile hálann sin mar hampla a ceanna tá lean go mór agus beidir níos smó, ní sin ar ríist. Tá rudí eile fásta an cloch sin. Cruthú sin hart fa 300 milliún bliana hen. Agus tá na cainealathe a bhí a gceiste an am. Is the hin cloch sin, the jocolina leo. Tá ólas sin sin ar an atmosphere a bhí an agus na cinneal aon bhí in san atmosphere sin agus beidir teas an atmosphere. No, tá sé seo cruthú seo ó na cráhairlí de min réad min anmhíthe beige dar bhaine monococcus. Agus na bhí siad sin bio, ghlach siad sin is teas na cráhairlí. Fianaise ar na cainealathe a bhí an am agus tá an aonaise sin is tí a charigh sin go fáil. Gach neach bio ar an dóin seo tá isce ionta. Gan isce ní bheith bheatha ar bí an. Tá isce go táhaach sin, tá isce go speisialta sin. Nuair bíon ólaithe géirí fisrú bhfuil bíon beochta bí sa chruinne. Bíonn siad a cuairtú bhfuil isce an. Má tá isce an tá seans go bhfuil beocht an. Mana bhfuil isce an tá siad cinnte nach méid beocht an.
Over 71% of the Earth's surface is covered by water. 326 million trillion gallons of it. But 97% of it is salty, and 2% is trapped in the poles. So all of mankind relies on just 1% to survive. But because much of this clean water lies underground, humans have mostly relied on rivers, lakes, and reservoirs. These are constantly refilled by the water cycle. As water evaporates into vapour, condenses into clouds, and falls back to earth as rain. Despite rain being essential to our lives, it's something that we know surprisingly little about. Dr. Mike Larson is Associate Professor of Physics and Astronomy at the College of Charleston and specialises in the study of raindrops.
I study rain because it's an accessible part of the universe that I don't know that much about yet. The technical definition of a raindrop is something that falls out of the sky that's in liquid form that's at least 0.5 millimeter in diameter. The process of rain formation is a very complicated one. You have to start with a dry aerosol particle or a piece of dust or dirt in the air. Aerosol particles can be a variety of different sizes, but a medium-large aerosol particle might be in the neighborhood of 1 micrometer across. That micrometer across particle has to grow eventually to become something that's basically 1 millimeter across to be a typical raindrop. So first things first, I'm going to write right up here because it's a common misconception that raindrops are not shaped like teardrops. A raindrop shape is the result of a balance of forces. And the reason anything has the shape that it has is due to the fact that that's going to be the thing that minimizes the energy associated with the system as a whole. For most situations, the way you minimize an energy is you make something spherical. None of them are going to look like a teardrop. On average, you're either going to be spherical if you're small or wider than tall if you're large. The speed at which a raindrop falls depends on its size. The smallest raindrops fall slower than the larger raindrops, and so the smallest ones fall 1 to 2 meters per second, a few miles per hour. And the fastest raindrops are going to be falling in the neighborhood of 9 or 10, maybe 11 meters per second.
And the way Mike measures this is by using a device pioneered in the early 1990s. A distrometer can work out the speed and size of individual raindrops.
This is the number one piece of equipment that we use to study rain variability. There's 2 lamps here, halogen lamps. The light bounces off this mirror, goes through a Fresnel lens, which widens the light beam, goes through this slit, this slit, this slit, and this slit, off that mirror into the camera. And you have a parallel path on the other side. Bounces off this mirror, goes through this lens, through these 4 slits, off that mirror, and into that camera. And those cameras are the ones that are taking 55,000 pictures per second. As rain falls through the center, it is seen by both cameras, and the view of one of the cameras is about 7 millimeters taller than the view of the other camera. This slit right here is vertically offset from this slit right here by a fraction of a centimeter. So that slight difference in heights where the 2 cameras are looking allows us to calculate the fall speed of the individual droplets, because we can figure out how long it takes to be seen in one camera compared to the other camera.
Back on campus, the data recorded on the distrometer helps Mike to interpret the radar measurements of actual storms.
We basically get this large list of information about each individual drop detected in the storm, telling us about, on average, do the drop sizes get larger as the storm progresses? Or is it more likely for the drop size distributions to be wider? If we explore and examine these drop size distributions in more detail, the hope is that we can determine a little bit more about the creation mechanisms in different storms, or potentially how to better outline the physical processes that go into going from a cloud to a full precipitation drop. And I find that fascinating, that it's been around us all this time. I mean, how big is the thing falling on your head in the thunderstorm is a question we still don't have great answers to. And I think I can help there.
If learning about raindrops helps us understand rain, knowing what happens when rain is scarce helps us understand our history. Professor Lian Cheng Tan has studied the effect of droughts on people living around the Dayu Caves in the Qingling Mountains of China.
雨对人类的这个生存和发展是有非常重要的这个意义的。像我们都知道，这个生命的发展它有3个要素，最重要的水、空气和食物。所以呢，水是排在第一位的。因此这个水不管是对于我们的这个植物也好、动物也好，还有这个人类也好，它都具有非常重要的这个作用。
The Qingling Mountains are an important geological boundary within China, separating the rice-growing regions to the south from the wheat-growing regions to the north.
所以研究清理这块地方的这个气候变化，对我们理解整个的这个我们国家的这个气候，还有包括为这些重大水利工程的未来的这个安全保障，都是有很重要的意义。
In 2015, Professor Tan visited the caves to study stalagmite formations, hoping to find patterns of climate change. But he discovered ancient inscriptions that contained a wealth of historical information which transformed our knowledge of the past.
这些字都比较敏感，后来一看到，就看到那个题词里面有记录天旱的这个字眼。 后来我就特别敏感，看这个字之后就特别兴奋，就想着，哎，这个是不是既然这个时段记录了天旱，那么过去的那些题词有没有在记录天旱的这种事件？
Analysing his samples, Professor Tan found the charcoal deposits on the stalagmites came from the torches used by people visiting the caves. When he dated these deposits, he was able to create a detailed history of the paleoclimate of the past 500 years.
所以我只要通过碳丝的测年，把这碳线的年代测出来，我就知道那时候什么时候这个有人进去过，再把这些人进去过的这个时间，再跟洞穴里面那些没数梯次的时间就可以对应起来。
He was then able to compare his findings with major historical events and work out how climate may have affected the course of history.
明朝嘉靖7年的这个干旱事件，他当时汉中世志就记载叫大饥，然后人相食。
During the 17th century, another decades-long drought caused widespread famine and led to multiple rebellions against the Ming dynasty.
那么中央这是一方面起义军的这个打击，另外一方面再加上关外满清的这种入侵，所以这最后最终导致了这个明朝的灭亡。这是我们从古气候的学的角度来讲，就是说气候的恶化对明朝的灭亡是产生了非常重要的这个影响。
In paleoclimatology, reconstructing ancient climates is an important way of understanding natural variation and also the evolution of our current climate.
然后再进一步来通过过去的变化，通过我们对过去变化的规律的这个探索，然后我们就可以通过建立一些模型来尝试性的来预测未来的气候变化。
But what caused the severe droughts recorded on the walls of the Dayu caves? China and other countries in South and Southeast Asia are dependent on the monsoon. Between May and September, a seasonal southwesterly wind blows in moisture from the Indian Ocean. Whilst the rain the monsoon brings can lead to devastating floods, they're essential for a country such as India, whose infrastructure and economy is dependent on this rainfall.
Most of our crop or agriculture activity are rain-fed, and therefore any failure in the monsoon in any of the year, there will have a cascading impact on various aspects of our life. People will start migrating from villages to cities, so the burden of the cities increases. Again, there also water shortage will come because of this population migration of that.
Tracking the movement of the monsoon weather system allows the country to prepare for different scenarios. That's why the Indian government set up the Monsoon Mission Research Centre in 2012.
Now this monsoon mission has provided us, very good forecasting system based on dynamical models that can give you prediction for several days to weeks to month to season. If the seasonal predictions are indicating that a drought is possible, what you can do is you can go for crops which are drought resistant. You can reduce the crop area, thereby use available water only to grow small amount of crops. Similarly, if you are expecting a lot of rain, dam water management can be done properly. You have to release the water, otherwise both rainfall and dam water can actually flood your cities or villages. And similarly, water supply for cities, etc., you can exactly plan and thereby reduce the wastage of the water.
Increasingly erratic global weather patterns are making the work of the monsoon mission even more important.
Extreme events like drought or heavy rainfall is going to be increased. These extreme events with the climate change is becoming more difficult to predict also.
Using the latest technology is one way of tracking our changing climate. But across the world, many amateur enthusiasts gather precious weather data using more conventional methods.
Man is really powerless against the forces of nature. There's an old Irish saying, we say, "Ni he lan gui he lan skolub," So what it means, we say, like Lánagui here, windy day, we say is not the day for thatching. What I'm close to here now, we say, is an automatic rain gauge. It's actually called the pluviometer because the French for rain is pluvo. So it works on about a weight system underneath it here, and also there's a laser system, and that detects, we say, if rainfall is falling at any stage. It's very, very sensitive. The least amount of rain that falls is detected. This is the first rain gauge that came in here to this enclosure back in 1984, made of copper. 5 inches diameter and 5 inches deep. And down into it then you have a bottle which decants or collects the rainfall. Now just taking a look here, like since 9 o'clock this morning, I'd say we've had about 5 millimeters of rain, with quite heavy rain there in the last hour, so I'd say about 5 millimeters of rain there. But I leave it back in here again because we're filming during the day, and I'll check it in the morning again, we say there at around 9 o'clock in the morning.
Once the data's collected, David records his findings using an intricate set of specialist symbols.
This system here now that I'm using is what's called synoptic code. It can be read by any meteorologist throughout the world. I just put in the time here, 0700. There was mist condition at that time, which is just two little small horizontal lines. There's about 300 different symbols in it. The type of cloud, the wind direction, the wind strength, prevailing weather at the time, or the past weather, is all included in a code.
This is more than just a hobby for David. At the end of each month, he sends his findings off to the professionals at the National Meteorological Service, Met Éireann. This observation station in County Kerry is one of 25 stations which monitor Ireland's weather. While the data recorded in these high-tech stations let meteorologists create up-to-the-minute weather maps, the work of David and like-minded volunteers is used in equally important ways.
Aibricha dónacha agan agus dinin siad obair fear tábhachtach go meis éireann. Is sais meteorolaí amateurach iad agus caitheann siad dar síl ar fad ag tóga leachtaní sna tíche agus ag dar chuid fermachaí in átaní iargúlta nach bhfuil stáisiúnaí aimsear agan.
Bailíonn muid an tola se go léir agus chuirtear isteach I bunach ar sunraí agus tá siad ar fáil the gach duna. So it tá picture umlán den tír agin leis na sunraí so agus úsáidean an rain éráide na figurí soch an troch dhéanamh an ahrú éráide an ahrú san pátrún báisteach agus ahrú na séasúr agus mar sinda. So is féidir le an báisteach anú a gur a gúmparáid leis an máisteach trocha blian ó hin, chuige blian ó hin, so yeah, tá sí fearthachtach doing.
We have recorded rainfall and weather data manually for centuries. But it wasn't until the 20th century that weather prediction developed in leaps and bounds.
The term atmosphere in about 1900 meant pretty much surface weather, maybe a little bit of mountain weather, and you were pretty much stuck to looking at the clouds from afar. In the middle of the 20th century, those radio balloons and some aircraft were able to go up into the middle atmosphere, and our whole understanding of atmospheric dynamics began to be revolutionized.
The resulting scientific advancements led to the launch of TIROS in 1960, the first ever weather satellite.
The television weather satellite started a trend that maybe we'll never have another surprise storm. We'll always be able to monitor the atmosphere. One of the reports at the time said, we wish to to monitor everything atmospheric, everywhere, always. That was the phrase.
This development was given a rocket boost when President Kennedy announced that the USA would put a man on the moon. And from the start, weather forecasting was one area the space program was intended to benefit.
Fourth, an additional $75 million, of which $53 million is for the Weather Bureau, will help give us at the earliest possible time a satellite system for worldwide weather observation.
That first ever image of the Earth from space, sent back by Tyros, was a massive breakthrough. Suddenly, as well as the rotation of the Earth, we could follow large-scale weather fronts for the first time and track the movements of the Earth's atmosphere. By today, thousands of satellites orbit the Earth, many of which are used for weather and planet observation. At NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center near Washington, D.C., scientists have used these satellites in a groundbreaking project.
The Global Precipitation Measurement Mission is a mission that's co-led by NASA and the Japanese to look at rain and snow around the world. But it doesn't do this alone. We've launched a core observatory in 2014, but then we are able to work with other partners around the world in Europe, in Asia, South America, and the United States to look at a global picture of precipitation, both in our communities and around the world. It's pretty cool technology to be able to measure rain and snow from 250 miles up. And the way that we do that is we actually look in the microwave frequencies. We can observe those signals passively to tell whether a storm has light rain or heavy rain. And then we can also look at it more in detail to be able to tell the different types of particles, whether they're ice or snow. Understanding what's happening from space is vital. We're able to get a global picture of precipitation. And so that type of information is fundamental into numerical weather prediction or to understanding our weather models, giving those observation data points into the models to be able to better predict our weather in the days to come and even looking at our climate in the years to come and decades.
Data from the Global Precipitation Measurement Mission's fleet of satellites lets meteorologists around the world study the way large-scale weather patterns interact with local systems. Scott Duncan is a professional meteorologist from Scotland. His line of work demands he keep a constant eye on the latest weather around Europe. Today, he's on a hill outside Glasgow, comparing satellite images with what he himself can see.
Well, sin tuvidé sa Glasgow, le brúgar sticking stuur, le emisher gama soccer, savach bla, stirm. In Jelvin Satcho, hafisachum gevel scoin tirch go tuvidé sa Glasgow, agus, well, wovsach grea nach Glasgow agus go tuvidé le bicken cumulus, agus uti tu seo feikin an Satcho, ket shies. Agus le tuvidé han stratus decan kuchach.
The weather information that satellites record are fed into supercomputers, able to process huge amounts of data.
An in Europe, bij zijn de hokkel Jelvin Satchel a hula quick minute, ach ons na station unichtje, han data chine stach a hula minute, uwzach minute en data uursha. Ha supercomputers uwzach more als koergach. Hij te jelike kri barach shesket quadrillion sum gach jik, no shesket petaflops, no petafloppichen. Lenig supercomputer talaspors le processors als hardware. Before gaan a supercomputer shot ro gallion na jaar a chruchig huin.
All this computing power is one reason today's 4-day forecasts are as accurate as one-day forecasts were 3 decades ago. The Burnsday storm of 1990 caused extensive damage and loss of life across Ireland, the UK and Northern Europe, despite being predicted.
Pero tor unje akin son Jessica's and Stormshaw van Jelvin Satchel gyma bunachach agus va da bata a crunich data an sa chuin sheer agus va eat oversach kutermach son a ravach of son na dunia an alp agus in Yorpe.
Today, Scott is part of the international energy industry, providing forecasts for markets across Europe. But he's also a climate change communicator. His graphics and weather charts have been retweeted by the World Economic Forum and climate activist Greta Thunberg, among others. While Scotland might not suffer the more extreme effects of global climate change, Scott does believe these changes will affect the prevailing weather patterns here.
Han tuvenir tornes fluche na tuvenir. Ha seo skas mar ha gu avistach a chain van tuvenir. Han Atlantic agus na beanten arst tuvenir a garstachig and je guske a tuchtum. Kutchach han a beanten tuvenir a tors faski don tuvenir van vorchuch den uske. She skal uske no rain shadow a hakin seo. Le blachig na crunje hasen dulgum fasen tuvenir nas fluche agus gum bean tuvenir gumanis tirm. Lis gevel commis toish en chiche fasen share suringun ravige horst de tuenich is a fopon nas traie mun droch hiche. Ha sjo geharich kutermach der ha tachert se more emischer richien lech tirmich no tul uske.
To keep up with these changes in weather systems, our knowledge of how they are created needs to continue to develop as well. And an important element of this is knowing how clouds form. Professor Raymond Shaw of Michigan Tech has dedicated much of his career to studying clouds.
A cloud is a collection of droplets or ice crystals. So the ingredients of a cloud are water and something for that water to condense on. And we call those aerosols. These are small droplets or small particles that are floating around in the air. Without the aerosols, clouds simply wouldn't exist on the Earth. When we say cloud, we usually are referring to a whole collection of those particles. And that could be a fog close to the Earth. That's like an Earth-connected cloud. Or it could be, deep clouds over the tropics can extend from almost close to the surface up to the top of the atmosphere. So, it could be 10 kilometers deep. So there's a whole range of sizes and scales. And that's one of the things that makes the cloud problem, trying to understand the processes that are happening in clouds. Will they rain? How much sunlight will the cloud reflect away back into outer space? To answer those questions, we need to understand processes happening at all of those scales, from the scales of a single droplet, as small as that droplet is, all the way to the turbulence and the convection and eventually to the full scale of a cloud, a storm or whatever system is producing the clouds. How much water a cloud holds depends on the size of the cloud and most importantly, the depth of the cloud. Also the part of the Earth that the cloud is on. So if you take a cloud over the Arctic, the cloud almost doesn't exist. There's just not a lot of water vapor in the atmosphere in cold conditions. But in a warm place like in the tropics, the clouds can be really juicy. They can hold a lot of water and you can get, many, many centimeters of precipitation.
And in order to study these different types of clouds, Dr. Shaw's pioneering cloud chamber is an invaluable tool.
A cloud chamber is basically a container or a box that allows you to create your own environment. The cloud chamber itself is 3.14 cubic meters, and that's why we call it the pi chamber. It's the only convection chamber in the world. You can control the temperature, the humidity, and perhaps most importantly, you can control the aerosols that you put in.
Okay, we're going to close it.
Rather than being like the referee that's watching the soccer game, you can actually be one of the players in the game, so to speak.
we were trying to get some of them with a long enough exposure.
Things that we've been really focused on are how do aerosols and clouds interact with each other. But it turns out that clouds themselves influence the aerosol particles. So they basically can consume the aerosol particles. They can help remove them from the atmosphere. They can actually cause chemical reactions to happen. They can allow aerosol particles to change their shape. And we can look at those processes in great detail in the PI chamber. No single tool is going to solve the climate problem. It's not going to complete the whole puzzle by itself, but it's an important piece of answering these kinds of questions.
If aerosols are a vital part of cloud formation, what happens when too many are pumped into the atmosphere? They become pollutants, overwhelming the natural cycle, and that can lead to acid rain. As Dr. Eddie Graham, a lecturer at the University of the Highlands and Islands, explains in his online lessons.
Now, rainfall by its nature is naturally slightly acidic. It has a pH of about 5.5 or 5.6. That's due to carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. However, acid rain is when it's got an anthropogenic origin. That means it's created by humans, and it's due to pollution in the atmosphere. Hoshig on triblage ishka sharavakik, asjay on Hyundai Gunivacus, Industrial Revolution, and on Neuvlin Jeg. She chemicard Alabanak, Robert Angus Smith, a Curan Anam Air Ishka Sharavakik. Fure Mak, Guvel, nor a Loskuk Shin Guel, le Tor Sulfur, Shine an Aver, a Han Ishka Sharavakik, a Chitum von Skohen. Just to give you an idea of how severe the acid rain problem was at one stage, in 1979 in West Virginia in America, a pH of 1.5 was measured at one weather station, one rain gauge. That's actually almost as strong as battery acid in your car, which is pretty concerning indeed. Places in the Far East today, which are industrializing very quickly, are seeing massive increases in problems related to acid rain. So acid rain hasn't gone away. We've just exported the problem to more eastern countries.
Though in the West, reducing fossil fuel use has brought acid rain under control, the content of rain is still closely monitored. At this bog near Edinburgh, Scotland's capital city, scientists monitor hundreds of different atmospheric components.
The focus at our site here is not measuring the rain quantity, but the quality of the rain, what's in it. And to also measure the air that goes with that rain, since the two are interacting. By measuring them simultaneously, we get a good understanding of where the air pollution is coming from, and therefore what it's going to be doing to the ecosystems.
The site is a vast peat bog, one of Scotland's keystone ecosystems, one vulnerable to environmental degradation.
I think the main challenge now is that it's still full of what's called nitrogen pollution. That comes in two forms: nitrate from cars and fossil fuel burning, and ammonia from farming activities, from urine and dung emitting to the atmosphere. But what we're finding is at a site like this, it's not just the rain that's important, it's the rain in interaction. To give you an example, we're seeing that a more extreme situation from colder winters, hotter summers, affects the summertime emissions of carbon dioxide. So carbon dioxide, a greenhouse gas. A site like this hopefully would be absorbing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Peat is the carbon dioxide store. And with these changing winters, warmer summers, we're seeing this changing around to become a source. So the site is losing carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. It means climate change is encouraging more greenhouse gas emissions to encourage more climate change. We've come into a positive feedback.
Despite the global drive to reduce carbon emissions, peat bogs such as these are good indicators of how our actions are having a direct impact upon the environment. 90 years ago, on the prairies of Canada and the US, Poor farming and land management methods, combined with periods of severe drought, led to conditions known as the Dust Bowl. This, combined with previous disasters, made the Great Plains of America fertile ground for opportunistic rainmakers and charlatans who made money out of people's desperation for rain by peddling pseudoscience and fake spirituality.
Turns out that if you pray long enough, it'll rain. If you shoot fireworks up, it'll rain. If you're desperate, you'll try anything. And I think a lot of these people were desperate. Not all the people were trying to sell their wares, but the charlatans of the American Great Plains, they definitely were. And they were rainmakers and rain fakers ever since.
One of the earliest pseudoscientific methods was known as concussion, which claimed that loud noises could agitate clouds and so make it rain.
Concussion method was an outgrowth of pretty much the US Civil War. After the Battle of Gettysburg, there was a gigantic rainstorm. There was nothing special about that, but they did think that the cannon and the roar of battle and the smoke were causing a disruption in the heavens. So the government in 1890 did sponsor General Dryenforth to go out to Texas and to try to cause it to rain during a drought. He tried to make a kind of a Civil War scale battle, and the more he shot it off and he took credit for any nearby rainstorms, he tried to make a report that said, "I made it rain."
These experiments even passed for entertainment.
They had the townspeople turn out in droves. And so, I mean, what are you going to do in the middle of the summer in Midland, Texas in the 1890s? Go to a great big fireworks show. And it was very popular.
By the middle of the 20th century, the US military had taken an even closer interest in the possibilities of controlling the weather. This time, the methods had a more credible scientific basis.
Operation Popeye was an idea that we could use environmental warfare in the Vietnam conflict. They thought if we could make it rain over the Ho Chi Minh Trail, it would be harder for the infiltration to come down. They had an Air Force base in Thailand that was tasked with setting off these silver iodide flares over the Ho Chi Minh Trail. It was so secret that the head of the base didn't even know what they were doing. It became a great big front page newspaper story. It led to a UN resolution that was banning the hostile use of weather modification as an agent of war.
The technique was called cloud seeding and was first proposed in the 1940s, but for more benign reasons. Project Cirrus involved silver iodide, today more commonly known as dry ice, which was dropped into the eye of a hurricane to modify its power.
And so flying out of Florida, they flew into a hurricane. And they put some dry ice into it, thinking that it would reduce its destructiveness or drive it back out to sea. Well, when they did seed it, the hurricane stopped and went directly on shore and basically devastated Savannah, Georgia. It was completely unexpected.
Details of this hugely embarrassing mission were buried in a top-secret archive for 30 years. But recently, there have been several breakthroughs in the science of cloud seeding, and the United Arab Emirates is one country that's leading the way. At the National Centre of Meteorology in Abu Dhabi, the government runs a programme that seeds the clouds above the desert.
Here in the UAE, we do not have natural water resources. We do not have rivers, for example. So we only have rain and desalination. And of course, we wanted to get the maximum out of each cloud in terms of water and rainfall. In arid and semi-arid region, we think this is one of the most important methods.
Although actual rainfall is scarce, clouds form above the UAE on over 200 days each year, and a large percentage of those clouds are suitable for cloud seeding.
Basically, the technology is that we use hygroscopic materials. This is the idea, is that you want to help in a microphysical process that happens inside the cloud, which is you want the droplets basically to hit each other in coalescence so that the water droplet grows bigger and then it falls on the surface. And then we send our aircrafts to take these materials to the base of the cloud. So once we put these materials inside, then with the motion, the up motion of the wind, then it takes these materials inside the cloud, and then this process happens. So you have a bigger water droplet, and then it falls as rain. What happens is that sometimes you have a cloud and it has water content in it, and it starts raining, but the droplets are so tiny that they evaporate even before they reach the ground. So by doing the cloud seeding operation, we make sure that we have a bigger droplet, and then we make sure that we get the maximum out of each cloud. Our forecasters here, of course, they see the weather. They know that after 3 days, for example, we have a good situation of forming clouds, so our team becomes ready, and then we immediately dispatch the aircraft to do the operations.
Go to location 257 at 99.
We're on duty all the time in case there's weather coming. We get to 3 days advance notice, but then all of a sudden there's poof, something pops up and it's like, scramble, we've got to go and get to this cloud that's just showing up. We're looking for towering clouds, the fluffy clouds that grow rather than the flat sheet clouds. There's an updraft within that cloud, and we're trying to penetrate into that updraft and release the salts in that location so that then they can be carried up into the cloud and mix with the water vapors and coalesce and form droplets and fall as rain. It can be quite exhilarating. There are some unusual experiences dealing with the clouds. When we do penetrate into that updraft, it's like the aircraft's becoming a glider. We're suddenly getting this big vacuum cleaner pulling air up above us. The aircraft is just gliding around at 300 kilometers an hour just in this updraft with no assistance other than the cloud pulling on us. When I fire the flare and I circle back around and come back through 2 minutes later and seeing the change, whether it worked or whether it didn't work, and seeing the result on the weather radar live on the aircraft and just seeing it, you know, just forming and falling as rain.
We see many countries now, either they started a long time ago in cloud seeding and now they are coming back. I think, especially here in UAE, I think the project is valid with the results that we've seen. It shows that, yes, we have to continue in this, and we have to continue advancing the science in this field.
Each year, as more and more communities find themselves living in areas of the world prone to drought, our ability to forecast the weather, and rainfall in particular, is becoming ever more vital. As our weather becomes increasingly erratic, with climate change often leading to either too much or too little rainfall, whether we like it or not, our relationship with rain is changing. Rain, the source of Earth's fresh water and essential to life. Since our earliest ancestors walked the land, rain has shaped humanity and played its part in the rise and fall of civilizations.
There's a famous saying, "Wekalani ola kahonua," and in Hawaiian, and it means when the heavens cry, the land lives, and that's what rain is.
And that's why it continues to play a pivotal role in the rituals of societies around the world. Rain refills our lakes and reservoirs, providing the water each of us needs every day. It feeds us by nourishing our soil, enabling our crops to grow and our livestock to flourish.
雨对人类的这个生存和发展是有非常重要的这个意义的。
But as rainfall patterns become more unpredictable, how will our relationship to rain be transformed in the years to come? And how do we make the most of this precious resource? Rain has a profound role in all our lives. It feeds our senses. Seeing it inspires artists. Hearing it inspires musicians. We love the smell and even the taste of it. We have rituals to ward off rain and ceremonies to call it down. And as we face an increasingly uncertain climate, our relationship with rain will continue to shape the way in which we live. Deep in the forests of Scotland, composer and sound artist Michael Begg is recording the sound of rain for his latest project.
It's actually quite nice. It's very subtle, but there's a kind of whisper that you get with light rain hitting needles up there. That's really sweet. And because in a wood like this you don't have lots of big fat leaves making big splashy sounds, it is just the most delicate little needly sound. So you've got soft rain on tall needles. Very, very sweet, it's relaxing.
As well as using a traditional boom mic to record the rain hitting the trees, Michael also uses specialised microphones to record the sound of rain hitting different surfaces.
So we've got a selection of bowls here. Nice little copper pan, ceramic bowl, cake, and a wee Tibetan singing bowl. I'm lucky enough to live in an environment where there's no shortage of material to actually capture. There's always something rich and unexpected. The rain's starting to get a bit heavier. So in this ceramic bowl we're getting this really nice, it's like a glockenspiel effect, or a xylophone, something like that going on. And we've got slightly quieter, but still quite musical effect of rain coming down into the copper pan. So there you go, it's a completely different quality from the ceramic bowl. It's much deeper, it's obviously more metallic. But the way that's picking up the solid bass transient as the raindrops hit, the individual raindrops, going to be really useful to me.
Michael's latest commission is for the Ocean Arctic Partnership. The sound he's recorded will be combined with weather data to create compositions that highlight the effects of climate change.
We can track the changes in what's happening in the polar ice cap and how it's affecting the weather that we have on a daily basis down here. And precipitation and evaporation are two key elements of that. So investigating that has become quite a central part of the composing activity. And the rain itself and the data arising from that rainfall could be charted as an alternative musical notation for me. It has a direct representation of its own voice in the score. Rain is going to continue to play a much more active role in our lives. It's going to be the primary mechanism through which a lot of us become increasingly aware of climate change. And so I was very, very keen to make sure that that was brought to bear in my work. The thing with rain is that we don't think too much of it, but if you were to take a step aside and become a visitor to this planet and saw rain for the first time, it would be such an item of absolute wonder. You know, you have this body that is lifted from the ocean and that's carried great distances seemingly magically in the air, and then it descends in these wonderfully attractive curtains and ribbons and ropes from the sky and replenishes the land. And you know, without rain we're not going to survive very long. So I mean, step aside from your own discomfort for a moment and you'll find something that's filled with wonder.
If the sound of an individual raindrop is musical, then the sound of consistent rainfall is white noise, which can drown out other noises. This may explain why millions of people around the globe use rain sound apps on smartphones and computers to help them relax. In Tsinghua University, Dr. Kun Feng is conducting research into why this might be the case. Her interest stems from her love of music and her previous research into music therapy.
有没有什么声音治疗、音乐治疗可以真的治愈人心的？就是对声音很好奇，而且我也当时就是觉得声音确实是可以让人放松的。通常有时候会做放松冥想，然后我们用的这些器材呢，就是用的声音呢，有时候我们就会用鸟声啊，或者说雨声啊，或者这种溪流的声音啊。
Her research focuses on the prefrontal lobe. When we're stressed or anxious, neural activity in this area can be sluggish. So can using the sound of rain change this?
发现了，当给予雨声的时候，就是它的脑波是可以被激活的，所以这也能让我们，至少是我们可以去探索，就是雨声到底对人的影响是怎样。这是挺值得我们去探索，因为它这样的一种放松的音乐，这是大自然赋予我们的。这样的环境呢，就是也可能让它可以更容易的，它把那个副交感激活的话，它就自己会，因为那是个低频，假设这种状况更容易激活的是副交感神经，它会让人就是处在放松，然后也就是可能心率会减慢，会整个人的状态会减下来，所以可能它会更容易去睡着。
But the research shows that rain does not affect everyone in the same way. For most people, the familiar sound is comforting, but this is not the case for others.
但是也要警惕，就是确实对于一些人来说，可能雨声它是有一些背景故事的。比方说雨声在那个天，他经历了一些生活上的变故，或者甚至是比方说大的像这次的这个水灾啊，那可能对于一个人来说，这种雨声就是体验就会不一样，他的激活的脑波也会有不一样的。
Studies like this can also have practical uses. In one study, researchers worked with patients who were awaiting operations.
有一些外科医生呢，在给病人做手术之前呢，他会让一组的病人听这个雨声，然后让一组的病人就是什么都不听然后那个研究就显示说，其实这个无论是做什么样的手术，其实人都是有这个术前焦虑的所以的话，术前焦虑他们之间在术前是没有差异的，但是在给一部分人在听过雨声之后呢他们在就是在做手术的过程中，他们整个的焦虑水平就降低了，而且他们在术后他们恢复会比术前没有就是采取任何措施的人会更好然后，但是绝大多数脑区就是有一些就是 从听雨声之后就持续的脑就被激活了啊，是这个兴奋状态，就只是雨声是让他就是让他可以更好的做任务，可以让他就是大脑注意力可以更加兴奋，然后这还是一个挺好的一个结果的。
Dr. Feng's research explains to us the science behind why people use rain sound apps to relax. And she can also empathise.
这时候，比方说工作特别忙碌，我要是回家开车的路上，可能我会选择放一段雨声，因为我会觉得就是这个就是我把我这一天的工作就都洗刷，然后让我能够放松下来。这至少对我来说，我觉得雨声是挺放松的。
If the familiar sound of rain is comforting, in countries where rainfall is scarce, even the idea of rain is exotic. So it may be a surprise to find an art installation in the United Arab Emirates that explores our personal relationship with rain. Rain Room.
The idea developed, I think, incrementally over a period of time where we were working with different media, and water was one of those elements that we tried to use for a sculptural project. And what seemed to be a really dead end suddenly allowed us to think about a whole environment in which we could control rain. And we were like if we can do that, then we might as well insert a human into a rainstorm without that person getting wet. It's a very elemental shared experience. People relate to rain across cultures, across gender, across age.
And you have the sound, you have the smell. It's not just the raindrop. I think maybe in daily life the visual impact is maybe the least important, because you have the smell, you have the sound on different surfaces. You can really read your environment if you're under a glass roof or outside.
Rain Room is a 100 square metre field of perpetually falling raindrops, where the water is constantly recycled. When people walk into the room, network sensors in the floor cut off the supply of water from above, letting each person wander through the downpour without getting wet.
The way that people respond with their body language to Rain Room is very similar across cultures and across the different locations where we've shown it. So that there are these, people who almost aggressively meet the unknown ahead of them. They just stride in and usually get soaked a little bit because they're a bit too quick. There are other people who are very conscious about their bodily sphere. They look very closely where they walk, where they put their foot. And then there are also people there just observing. It's very sort of archaic personality types that come out in the behavior towards the rain, I think.
Rain Room found its permanent home at the Sharjah Art Foundation in 2018. Before this, it had been installed in many cities across the world, following its premiere in London's Barbican in 2012. The artists were struck by the different responses the work provoked in different countries.
I think in Los Angeles it had been a drought for 8 months. So there was a young family with a baby, and they came to the Rain Room specifically not to have an art experience, but for their child to experience rain for the first time in its life. That was food for thought in terms of, is this how we will experience dystopian futures? Is this all we have left to experience nature, like these very sparse, minimalist recreations of something? And it's frightening how quickly we trigger on that.
One way to recreate the experience of rain may be to focus on a single sense. In Kanauj, in northern India, local perfumers have perfected the process of creating the scent of rain.
The smell that you get from post-rain, it is something which cannot be defined in words. It is heavenly. And so we try to create that fragrance into a bottle, a perfume oil, which is called atar mitti. And atar mitti is basically the smell of the rain captured in a bottle.
Kanauj has been at the heart of the Indian perfume industry since the time of the Mughals. But the Mishran family began to create the atar mitti in the early 1900s.
My great-grandfather was among a handful of perfumers who discovered this art. He was also among the very few perfumers who used to supply zamindars to the kings, to the royal families of those times.
And he passed these secrets down to his son, who in turn passed them on to the younger generations of the family.
My grandfather, he used to take us, me and my brothers, to the nearby ponds, and we used to practically see from what kind of mud is required. We have seen the whole chain right from scratch, and he used to mention that the rains are very, very crucial part of this.
Even on the rich alluvial plains of the Ganges basin, only rain-fed ponds have the unique biochemical ingredients to create the atar mitti. During dry periods, certain plants produce an oil which is absorbed by the clay soils. When it rains, the oil is released along with geosmin, a chemical released by various blue-green algae which live in the soil. Together, the oil and the geosmin produce petrichor, the earthy scent of rain. These rain-fed clays are the basis of the methods used to create atar mitti.
We have these suppliers of the baked clay. So these are people who collect the mud from the rainwater ponds, and they are baking it in a certain formation. We put this baked clay into these vessels. Then we pour water from this, and then from the hydrodistillation process, we get the vapors from this into a funnel. This funnel has a base oil which is used as a fixative to carry the fragrance, because the molecule which arises from the mud, it does not have any liquid formation of its own, so we need a base oil. So we get that collected into a base oil, and then we filter it into making into different vessels, and there are certain process of filtration. Then we filter it out, and then the bottling happens, and then it is ready to be dispatched. This is something which is close to my heart, and this is close to my tradition. So why not carry this forward, and something of very own Indian origin and very of my own can be offered to the world, which is pure, which is natural, and which is very, very organic.
But in order to preserve this heritage, the arrival of the monsoon rains are crucial.
Even before the monsoons come in, everybody is worried whether there will be good rains, there will not be good rains, and so on and so forth. Atar mitti, we were always told, it smells like the first rain that comes on the ground, which is soothing, which has a sense of relief. It has a soothing smell. It has a sense of relaxation.
As the perfumers of Kanauj make use of the available rain to create their unique product, on the other side of the globe, another local company also depends on a constant supply of rainwater. In Scotland, it is often said that today's rain is tomorrow's whiskey. And the people of Raasay in the mild, wet climes of the west coast of Scotland know about both.
Ga meer hoeken gaan Raasay. Ik unig maar echter jaarlijkje van zich te hakken, zo'n landje is hashin gema forsnach gewillen teistale akinje. Als je vechten getrang se hai, ach kutjer hakarmon oprach. En is ken ik je teistale nog roan van de show. Kan koik blienig in een raas. Charoskiel leith teistale na kalmashin. En is habarak eet fichit niachin is gopet sin teistale.
To put that in context, 1 in 8 people living on the island now work in whisky.
An aráir ha go mas sonrichte leis go bhfuil sin taring uisce amach as na crícan. Ha críc ganmhích acin fan ar chasan is fan taistála seo is ha sin go ma fórsanach go bhfuil cét acin gus bortholaí dhéanú sa sin taring amach an uisce gus an uisce bethe dhéanú.
Essentially, we have a large mixing bowl with a sieve on the bottom. You've got 9,000 litres of water coming in, and essentially what we're doing is we're trying to boil the sugar out of the barley using the hot water. What you end up with is about 5,000 litres of the sugary water draining out through the bottom of the sieve on the mash tun, and then you end up with the excess water being recycled back into the system again. The barley's then just deposited out the door, the solids that we don't use, and it's donated as local cattle feed. So both the excess barley and the excess water is all just getting recycled.
Nuair a ha gáil uisce bethe, go háiris an na chéadúras, gaf blasaid gun uisce nó cálaí le isteach, so nuair sin cuireanna uisce. Nuair a ha go láitead, ha an saf go má láitead cuiteach. Ach an nuair sin nuair a chuiris tú uisce isteach bí gáil saf an etargealachte ag gach iad. Intin ritan me dhéon uisce bethe, fyd tú uisce bethe gáil an an dói san bí. Chanéal dói cearán.
The Hebridean Islands get over 1,000 millimetres of rain annually, and it usually rains on Raasay on over 200 days every year. It is therefore an ideal location for whisky production.
There's probably nothing more important to making whiskey than the water. It's the core ingredient: water, barley, yeast. By law, it's the only three things we're allowed to use to make Scotch whiskey. We are distilling on site, but we're also bottling, we're also maturing, filling our casks here. So what's quite interesting about the distillery opposed to some other places is that we actually are using one single water supply for every stage in the process.
So the rain that falls on the island is now part of a worldwide market, as the whisky it helps create is sent all over the globe.
Thank
200 miles south of Raasay in Ireland, abundant rainfall feeds thousands of holy wells up and down the country. Here, people believe that bathing in and even drinking the rainwater is good for mind, body and soul.
People circle the well, praying, saying the rosary. Some people get their solace from walking in the water barefoot. Maybe it's a cleansing of the soul. I suppose it was something that was probably adopted by Christianity from pagan times. When you look at the surroundings here, there's something very tranquil and peaceful about it, and there is most certainly something very spiritual about it. My family goes back generations here. The O'Dolans are known as the Ernochs, which would be it's like a hereditary keeper of the well, keeper of the water, and we're supposed to look after it and maintain it and so on. A geologist who was here in the past maintained that the water fell as rain maybe 200 to 300 years ago. Took so long to permeate down through the rocks, it was cleansed, but it also may have picked up trace elements of iron and copper and so on. Somewhere on the water table there is a fracture, and the pressure forces the water up at 600 gallons a minute. The flow of water never changes. The water in the well is supposedly has the cure of a sore throat and of a bad stomach. I know people who swear by it.
Very chidden shalach non the boy and so ag le beltanya agus passionate reach la genu kenshin am akiji be as na hanbi agus go mo should total agus go mo raher in the dini goni boer van canals and rudder Tá contas an fásta fa réine bheit seach na a bh tromlacham agus go dóta siad beidir dealamh den bhaid an bhuiir nó crás fannaí agus go domhaid sin san uisce agus gur seo dóid le dhéirí ar na déthe fetain a chóirt chugan. Go minic bíon mar hampla crám ag an tobar agus chutú daoine brataí ar a chrám agus bíon daoine más go náistrathe in aiciid go dtíon bratag agus a réir mar bhíon bratag go fiá ba sin mar bhíon aiciid a gimach do chéin nó do gine mantra. nó creidú gur idir gohfuil an tuisce idir an síl seo agus an síl eile idir a ní a bhí feicithe agus a ní dó aici idir an duine agus brun na hallhhairthe mar smáileat. nó ba bhaithe a hanig an tuisce agus ba bhaithe a hanig an bethead a réir sin. Sílam go dtigin daoine go bhfuil ceangal idir na héitna seo agus an chéan amsir agus gur ar gáigur bhfuil muidir déanú teagháil leis na héitna díabhrathe sin ó réine ar sinse agus gur sin séad ná brisú.
There's something very peaceful and calming about the well, and local people, you know, it's part of us. And really, it's everybody's well. It's not just one person's or one family. The well belongs to everybody, and it'll be here for generations to come.
If rainwater in Ireland's holy wells can acquire divine characteristics, it is held in equally high esteem in China, where it has been used for centuries in the art of brewing tea. However, choosing the right type of rainwater was always important and continues to be so to this day.
那个明代的张元啊，他在这个茶录当中就说，那么茶者是水之神，水者是茶之体。那么，所以在选择如何用水泡茶这个问题上，古人就提出了自己的这个见解。那么，雨水在明代人看来啊，它是一种天地阴阳调和的这样一种产物，所以它又被称之为天泉。那么从这个之后，年轻人就开始使用雨水去泡茶了。秋天的水比较好，梅雨季节的水次之啊，用它的原文叫秋水甘而烈，秋水白而烈，梅水白而甘。那么甘甜的水呢，会夺去茶的这个本味，所以梅水就不如秋水。那么春天的水和夏天的水相比呢，那春天的水要更好一点啊，因为春天的这个水是和风，是所谓的甘雨甘露降下来的。夏天的水一般会认为说稍微再次一点，特别是那些暴雨降下来的水，古人认为它是不宜饮用的，不宜饮用。那么在大雨滂沱、连绵不断的这种雨，或者说是颜色发黑的这些雨，或有腥臭味的雨，或者是直接从屋檐上接下来的这些雨水，那么都是不宜直接饮用的。那么不论是梅水还是雪水还是秋水，那么在收集之后都要经过长时间的储存，让它彻底的这个清澈之后，才可以用来煮茶和烹茶。那么收集的方式比较多样，如果你们感兴趣的话，可以去北海公园。北海公园有一个雕塑叫做仙人盛露盘，很有意思，它是一个铸成的一个金人的这样一个雕塑。这个人手里头呢捧着一个盘，那个盘就是用来承接雨水的。
Rain is entwined with the tea-making culture of China, but it has also inspired many of its ancient poets.
我们的诗歌当中，我们的诗词当中就会出现很多与之相关的，比如与时间、与友情、与心绪相关的这样一些诗词啊，比如我们非常熟悉的杜甫的 好雨知时节，当春乃发生啊，这2句太有名了。那么一个好字就能看出杜甫对这场春雨的喜爱之情，而且他用的是一种拟人化的写法啊，知时节，表明这个雨是有意识的啊，他选择了该降下的时候，在春天万物滋生的这个时候落下。小的时候就单纯觉得这些名篇佳作特别的美，读起来朗朗上口，有一种美感在其中。
The great Chinese poems would have been written using calligraphy, which is an artistic interpretation of the characters in the Chinese written language.
禹这汉字在甲骨文当中写作这个形状啊，它的上面有一横啊，代表天，下面呢有6条断续的这个短线，代表不停滴落的这个雨滴。那在金文当中呢，上面这3条线啊，有时候会接上，有时候会断续，就像云一样。那么经过历变之后的楷书，写作我们今天常见的这个雨的形象。所以《说文语部》对于它的解释是：雨是水从云中来，啊，云中来。那么这个匡，我们常写的这个雨的这个匡半匡，念作迥，迥就是云的意思，啊，云的意思。水临其间也。意思就是说，水是从天上的云里面降下来的，它的本意是雨水，而雨也可以用作动词表示下雨，因为水滋养万物，所以雨又含有恩泽恩惠的这个意思。
If rain is a blessing, what do you do if you don't want it to rain? In Ireland, you call for the Child of Prague. Tradition holds that if this small, flamboyantly dressed statue of the child Jesus is placed in the bride's garden on the eve of a wedding, then it will not rain on the big day.
Lan mór mórach. Ife tosa mórach. Na cúna dé.
Baimid a positív mas so Thomas Gear go mai lá bragan.
I'm up in green Tom with the soul. Shall we even tanish?
Chira Marinos. Tá síle tim a corsna teacht I cúpla nóid agus be Land of Prague eke agus dúirt síle go bhfuil sin é an fear.
Ha me chuí blion déag do mo híl duna réhhaisnis na heimsere ar fud an dahan a chaint faoin na pisrógi sin ach fecim héin go bé choras óliacht atá níos táhatí ná choras creative mar sin, but banna me trialas ein rud atá an agus mar cén rud sin ag dtíirech agus mas rud ige déir an síle tim go an Child of Prague go má cha mé rá go bhfuil si go má.
Fair na balloons. Oh yeah, agus an Child of Prague.
Go mé lála bre geall green chat a maide. The chudis mu de macha seánó.
Yeah.
Tá deoideh gon leanamh ísa. Sinna tugus ní gon dealach gon leanamh ísa héin. Ca mé rá go raibh de segum sa rénos. A go bhfuil said ben sás do mar sé tirim le bhí sé testal go géir. Ní gá go mar sé tirim ar family. So sinna tá síana ní seo fós me tá na bhíns lá tirim me testal. Tugam hartan os statue agus. Ai brín sé. Tugann sé grás do éile chamá le sin. Tugann tam heráilet go tugann. Sláinte an ardmhice lethe dhéega ar chrán na páise. Chun sin na híru. Sláinte na mná mála ar rug amach gan chéile. Agus sláinte ní fáric a bhena éidir. So tar sláinte na nuíomh agus ísa chugaí. Denise, chuidir mu leanamh ísa ísa go. In seo.
Cén áit síle?
Bhfuil áit cinneach 10 compórteach an sin, go mé sé breanú steach ar I teach, agus ar lánún fóst a máideach, agus a brunna grástíí nósas na fleisir.
Fair play, girls.
Go mé sé sunna sás de fesaíl.
Gur míle
nach bine hestinshain.
Gur
socra síos go 10 a tena sí.
Okay.
Agus nach
Susan seo?
Sé.
Carton?
Is tinnis. Agus ar mu dí agus an leanana ví san is.
Thusan seo?
Istecha tinnis. A bhrunna ar an lánún, Ife agus Cian.
Is léir gur oibrigan dalh.
Yeah, well, Nina and Bosch took, so yeah, Tiber shape.
Rinna Land of Prague on job dún. Tá am sure go hálinn agus bhí sé ar ice. So tá an sásta.
Yeah, bhí sé híntaach. Yeah.
Bhfuilinn go mór an dealamh a churmach a ní ribh the bhanis.
A day without rain might be rare enough to be cause for celebration in Ireland. But in the UAE, a country that has one of the lowest annual rainfalls in the world, hoping for rain is ingrained in its culture and religion.
It rains more and more rarely in Dubai, so it used to rain a lot more 30 or 40 years ago. And we would get multiple days of rain. Here, if it does rain, it will rain for a day, and that's it. So the rain has really reduced over the last 50 years very noticeably. I think people do remember heavy rains, and they remember the weather being better, but it's present in the psyche culturally in that sense.
Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar.
We do have a prayer for rain in Islam. We pray it here, usually every year. It's usually done at the behest of when the ruler of the country, here in the UAE, Sheikh Khalifa bin Zayed, there'll be a public announcement that people will be asked to come and pray for rain in a certain number of days. So it should be 3 or 4 days before, so you can spiritually prepare yourself for the experience. So you're supposed to fast for 3 days prior to the prayer for rain and repent from all your sins and give money to the poor and generally become a better person, inshallah, before you actually ask for something so that your prayer will be answered.
Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar.
The first part is the actual standard Eid prayer, or the prayer that we would pray on the 2 feast days of Islam, Eid al-Fitr and Eid al-Adha. And then the Imam would get up on the pulpit and he would give a sermon asking for God's forgiveness 7 times in the first part of the sermon and 5 times in the second part of the sermon. And then he would turn his cloak over, and so the bottom of it is facing towards the heavens. And then the congregation would do the same thing. And then he would make a prayer, a dua, as we say in Arabic, where he would say, Allahumma ij'alha suqya rahmatin, wa la taj'alha suqya adhabin, wa la hadmin, wa la bala'in, wa la gharaqin.
Allahumma suqya rahmah, la suqya adhabin, wa la hadmin, wa la gharaq.
The translation of this is, oh Lord, please make it a prayer of mercy and don't make it a prayer of torment, nor an annihilation or a tribulation or something that will cause our buildings to fall down or for us to drown.
Allahu Akbar.
Cultures that grew out of the desert value any rainfall. But the farmers of Assam depend on the arrival of the monsoon rains. Here, ritual plays an important role in making sure they come and are plentiful when they do.
আমাৰ ইয়াত যেটো মানে এৰিয়াত বৰষুণৰ যেতিয়া অভাৱ হয় তেতিয়া আমাৰ খেতিয়কসকলে আকাশলৈ মেঘলৈ চাই থকাৰ বাদে আৰু কোনো উপায় নাই।
Biswajit Saika lives in the tea-growing area of Assam. The village has no irrigation, and the local river is prone to pollution, so rain is vital for its survival. The villagers are aware of the pressure this places on their community from a very young age, and in junior school they are taught a poem that offers a solution.
O meg, বৰষুণ নিদিয় কিয়? মেঘে তেতিয়া কৈছে ভেকুলিয়ে যে তোৰ নুতুৰাই মইনু দিম কিয়? অৰ্থাৎ ভেকুলি আৰু মেঘৰ মাজত সম্পৰ্ক ৰাখিছে।
But the croak needs to be coaxed from the frogs. So the villagers perform the ritual of the frog wedding. Soon, the male and female frog will be married in a lavish ceremony, repeating a tradition that has been around for generations.
গতিকে সেইকাৰণে মানুহে মানে অতীজৰ পৰা আমাৰ ককা দেউতা আজু ককা দিনৰ পৰাই বৰষুণ নহ'লে মানে এই ভেকুলী বিয়া পাতি আহিছে ট্ৰেডিশ্যনেলি এইটো ইয়াত চলি আহিছে
It is the women of the village who prepare the frogs for the wedding, but everyone contributes something, be it money or food, clothing or decoration. The frog's wedding can cost as much as a human ceremony, though the idea behind the ritual is simple.
ঠিক সেইমতে যেতিয়া পানী খৰাং হয় নহয় ভেকুলীয়ে টুটুৱাই নাথাকে পানী পালেহে ভেকুলীয়ে টুটুৱায় ভেকুলীৰ লগত বতৰৰ সম্বন্ধ আছে আৰু বৰুণ দেৱতাৰ লগত সম্বন্ধ
Since the entire village is involved in organising the wedding, they all turn out to celebrate.
ভেকুলী বিয়া বৰষুণৰ কথা কৈছে ভেকুলী মানে আমি ভেকুলী বিয়া পাতোঁ নহয় আমি গান গাই ভেকুলী বিয়া পাতোঁ গান আমি যিমানে গান গাওঁ সিমানেই মানে আমি মনতে ভাবোঁ যে আমাক বৰুণ দেৱতাই এবাৰ কথা শুনিছে আমি সেইকাৰণে গীত গাই ভেকুলী বিয়া পাতোঁ
And finally, it's time for the frogs to begin their wedded life together. In Waimea, on the island of Hawaii, the traditions for calling down rain also have deep roots.
Rain is important to our people and our landscape. It's important to our farmers, our families. It has great significance around the whole world, but the rain is what continues our agriculture. It continues to feed our land. It's the waters that we have. There's a famous saying, "We kalani ola kahonua," and in Hawaiian, and it means in English, when the heavens cry, the land lives, or the earth is alive, and that's what rain is. We have hundreds of different rains in Hawaii. Maybe rains fall from the east, they have a name different from the ones that fall in the west, and different from the ones that fall straight down. We have rains that kind of go horizontal, some that come with winds, some that come with fog, and so all those characteristics garner a different name for the different rains. And famous ones where I live, the kipu'upu'u, the lilinoi is a fog type of rain that comes with some wind, and they're family to us. The rains become part of our ohana. And so when we need them, we call them and they come.
They begin by preparing the hokupu, an offering they will present to the rain gods. As they believe that plants are physical manifestations of the gods, a selection of vegetables nourished by the previous year's rainfall are wrapped in leaves.
In prep for ceremony, we will have a week of pule, which is prayer, and we'll have certain eating rituals that's done in preparation for our bodies to be ready to be in that spiritual realm. And then when it's time for ceremony, we put on our traditional garments, and we have a kihe. We put on kinolau, or adornments, onto our body that represent certain things, and then we conduct ceremony. We usually dance with our ceremony, and so we have the hula that's conducted, and those are the movements of the earth. So as the beats are drumming, they're the beats of the earth and the movements of the earth. And then you see how the trees blow and the rain falls. And so it's almost like ceremony or more ritual and giving more to it, yeah, by having the actual movements of rain fall as we're chanting for rain to come down. A lot of prayers are involved, a lot of prepping the spirit, and a lot of prayers for protection, and then being in the right mind frame and conducting ceremony. For generations, we've conducted rain ceremonies, and it was taught to us by our grandparents, and it was taught to them by their grandparents, and it's the whole aspect of giving back and having that exchange with your environment around you and being one with your landscape. We will offer our crops onto a rain ko'a, or a rock-structured platform, and pray to the rain gods and ask them for more rain and for life-giving rain that will feed our earth and feed our crops and then make it abundant. And then eventually it will start raining down on us, and it's important for us to keep these traditions alive because they were passed all the way down to us. They survived generations. Who are we to stop it now? So it's for us to make sure they survive for the next generations. And who knows, if we stop chanting for rain, maybe there'll be a drought and we'll lose everything we have. So it's not a risk I think we're willing to take. And so we'll continue the traditions of our people and continue to call for rain to keep our island thriving as much as we can.
From ancient poets to modern artists, rain has always fascinated humanity. As we look at traditions across the world, it brings into focus rain's impact on our beliefs and our cultures.